who's out there. So Erin, why don't you pull up the first polling question?
Well, I would like to bring up the first polling question, but looks like we're having some technical difficulty here, and the polling questions have disappeared.
Oh, wonderful.
So I think we should just start with the presentations, and if when Cord gets back in, she's going to try to get those back, and then maybe we can do it at that point. So sorry about that, everybody.
I'll be able to get him back just a sec.
No worries. Then Anastasia Griffin from the Risk Management Agency, take it away.
Okay, great. Yes, so again, my name is Anastasia Griffin, and thank you all for joining us. I am going to probably, since my internet connection is not the greatest, I'm going to turn off my camera to give this, but I do have that presentation up there for you. So yeah, so I'll just get started. So again, my name is Anastasia Griffin, and I'm going to be covering USDA's Risk Management Agency programs. But before I begin, if I could just go over the disclaimer with you. So the purpose of the following material is to promote awareness of risk management concepts and to highlight USDA's risk management products, benefits, features, and availability. This material does not change the content or the meaning of current policy provisions, filed actuarial documents, or approved procedures. Next slide. So the Risk Management Agency's vision is to secure the future of agriculture by providing world-class risk management tools to rural America. Created in 1996, RMA serves America's agricultural producers through effective, market-based risk management tools to strengthen the economic stability of agricultural producers and rural communities. RMA is committed to increasing the availability and effectiveness of federal crop insurance as a risk management tool. RMA manages the Federal Crop Insurance Corporation to provide innovative crop insurance products to America's farmers and ranchers. Next slide. Again, I am from the USDA Risk Management Agency's Spokane Regional Office, and we administer the federal crop insurance programs in Alaska, Idaho, Oregon, and Washington. We also provide outreach to help farmers with risk management tools. Next slide. So RMA is responsible for developing and maintaining federal crop insurance policies. So this includes determining the rates, prices, and yields for each crop at the county level every year. RMA is also in charge of compliance to prevent fraud or abuse. Private insurance companies and agents are responsible for selling insurance policies to producers and settling their claims. The federal government subsidizes the premiums to reduce the cost of crop insurance for farmers and reinsures the private insurance companies to share the cost of the claims. Next slide. Federal crop insurance provides protection from production loss, price decline, or a combination of both for individual commodities. There are production and revenue plans of insurance, which are based on a producer's actual production history. Area plans of insurance that are based on averages in an area like by county. The Farm Service Agency also has a non-insured crop disaster assistance program known as NAP that is available in counties where RMA crop insurance is not available for a specific crop. Next slide. Why should you consider getting federal crop insurance for your farm or ranch? Well, it may help you stay in business after a bad weather event or a low production year. The government subsidizes the premium to make it more affordable, and it provides some financial stability and may improve access to credit. Next slide. Production-based policies insure against yield losses due to natural causes such as adverse weather, wildlife, insects, and disease. If the harvested plus any appraised production is less than the yield insured, the producer is paid an indemnity based on the difference. Revenue policies provide protection against price decline or increase or a combination of both, in addition to yield losses. Projected and harvest prices are used to establish your coverage and to determine whether you have a loss. There is additional premium cost for this added coverage. Next slide. There are 4 phases of the crop insurance cycle each year. The insurance plan, level of coverage, and price are selected when you submit an application. It is important to know the sales closing date and the cancellation date. These are deadlines for buying or canceling your policy. For example, spring wheat sales closing date is September 30th. There is also a date for reporting how many acres of the crops you plant to determine your premium owed. You have to provide a notice of loss to start the claim process. RMA may make program changes prior to the next year's contract change date. Next slide. Whole farm revenue protection is available nationwide, and it insures all commodities produced on your farm. Coverage is based on your allowable revenue determined by your previous income tax returns. Specialty and organic commodities, crops and livestock can be covered. It insures all commodities on the farm except timber, forest products, and animals for sport, show, or pets. It can be tailored to any farm with allowable revenue. Whole farm protects against loss of revenue from all commodities produced on your farm. This includes decline in production, price, or quality from unavoidable natural causes. There are also provisions for replant or if you are unable to plant. Next slide. Whole farm revenue protection can be purchased alone or with other federal crop insurance policies or NAP from FSA. When whole farm revenue protection is purchased with another crop insurance policy, the whole farm premium is reduced due to the coverage provided by the other policy. Next slide. To qualify for whole farm, you have to be a U.S. citizen or resident, be eligible to receive federal benefits, file a Schedule F tax form, have 5 consecutive years of federal tax returns, and be in the business of farming. Next slide. If you are a beginning farmer or rancher, you only need 3 years of tax records. To insure for the 2023 crop year, you had to farm in 2022 and have filed Schedule F forms for 2019, 2020, and 2021. There is also an extra 10% premium subsidy for beginning farmers and ranchers. Next slide. Micro farm is basically a crop provision under whole farm revenue protection, and it first became available for the 2022 crop year with a sales closing date in our region of March 15th. If you meet requirements at the sales closing date and you elect to purchase coverage under these micro farm provisions, these provisions will be attached to and made part of the whole farm revenue protection provisions. Next slide. Microfarm is available to producers that have an allowable revenue of 350,000 or less, and carryover insureds, so insureds who have had coverage the previous year, are allowed an allowable revenue of $400,000. Coverage level is between 50 and 85%, and it minimizes the underwriting requirements that you need to purchase this program. Next slide. So again, when this policy talks about carryover insureds, it's specifically referencing having been insured under microfarm in the previous crop year. As opposed to whole farm revenue protection, microfarm has a single commodity code for all commodities under the microfarm consolidated sales, and it plays a significant role in establishing an insured's microfarm policy. Next slide. So again, in order to be eligible for microfarm, you have the approved revenue cap. However, if a producer is vertically integrated, or if they have any commodity insured under a different policy, they are not eligible for microfarm. So this is a difference between whole farm revenue protection, where you can have multiple policies, and microfarm, where you can only take this policy. Next slide. Those who are interested in insuring under microfarm must provide revenue records for the value of the commodities produced on their farm. Next slide. Individual commodities are not required to have separate expected values or expected yields. 3 years of sales records are required. The insured can certify the sales records, but must provide those records that comprise the marketing record of commodities on the farm if requested by the approved insurance provider. The insured must also certify the total planted acres over that same 3-year period, so an expected value can be calculated. They must have acceptable verifiable evidence to support the acres certified, and may be requested to provide those records. Next slide. The expected value is based on the 3-year average revenue for the farm operation, as long as operating conditions have not changed. For example, an increase in land or new commodities on the farm. Next slide. Any other revenue from non-farm operations cannot be used to determine coverage. Next slide. I have here an example from the cost estimator that is available on RMA's website. So this is how it would look for calculating $100,000 in average revenue with this program under the different levels of coverage. And you see there that we have the 3 rows of liability, total premium, and then the bottom row has the producer's premium in red. Next slide. So I just wanted to draw your attention to a few changes that we made just very recently for the upcoming crop year for 2023. So previously, we had lower approved revenue for both whole farm and microfarm. So one of the first change that's probably the biggest change would be that we increased the maximum approved revenue for whole farm to 17 million and for microfarm to 350,000. And again, these are for new insureds. We have also eliminated the expense reporting, and we have a new method of reporting expected revenue when a commodity is not able to be established. We also have the expected value and expected yields with added clarifications and a report available. And we also made 2 clarifications for direct marketing commodities. So these are some of the fairly significant changes that we made just recently here for this upcoming crop year. Next slide. So I have here a screenshot of RMA's website, and there are a lot of risk management tools and information located on our website. And I just wanted to point out that you can find an agent by clicking there on the Tools tab and then selecting Agent Locator. I've circled those in red. And then if you're interested in more information for beginning farmers and ranchers or the whole farm program, those are circled there in yellow. And I do have our website address there to the left. It's just rma.usda.gov. And so that is where you would go to get started. Just remember that the agents are the ones that sell the crop insurance. So they would be your first point of contact for crop insurance. Next slide. And here's just another screenshot for more information for beginning farmers and ranchers. And then you can find more information specific for beginning farmers there at the bottom with the red arrow. Next slide. Lastly, I just wanted to point out some benefits that are available for beginning farmers and ranchers, not just for whole farm, but just in general. So if you do qualify as a beginning farmer and rancher, you do have an exemption from paying the administrative fee for catastrophic and additional policies. Another benefit is an additional 10% of premium subsidy for coverage policies. Another benefit is to use the previous producer's production history with permission when you have specific acreage that is transferred if you were previously involved in the decision-making or physical activities. And then lastly, the increase in the substitute yield adjustment, which allows you to replace a low yield due to insured cause of loss from 60 to 80% of the applicable transitional yield. So with that, I just wanted to give everyone my phone number, and I will put my email address in the chat. I know that I believe I have a few fact sheets that will be available to you. And then if you have any questions, feel free to let me know in the chats or in our breakout meetings. And so with that, I will hand it back off to Erica.
Thank you so much, Anastasia. That was great. So now we are going to move into our—
Oh, quick, Erica, we do have the poll ready. Do you want to do that real quick?
Yes, let's do the poll.
I know we only have a couple participants on today, but for those of you who joined us, it really helps us when we're targeting our demographic for these talks. If you could just take a quick second and answer the poll questions. There's 3: who you are, what you're interested in learning about, and that would be awesome. All right, looks like we are good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. So next, we will be moving on to our NRCS rep. Aaron Roth is going to be speaking today. Aaron, as mentioned earlier, he is also one of our Zoom technicians. He works for NRCS as a district conservationist for Grant County, and he works out of John Day, Oregon. So with that, take it away.
Thanks, Erica. Can everybody see the updated presentation, and can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can see your presentation and hear you. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you. Yeah, so I was asked to kind of fill in for the normal presenters today and talk a little bit about the NRCS beginning farmer rancher information And basically, I want to kind of give everybody a little bit of an introduction to who NRCS is and some of the services that we have available. So a lot of times people will ask, what does NRCS do? Some of the things that we can do is we can provide you with technical assistance, basically information that we can share with you based on the latest science that's out there, or provide engineering expertise or different topics that might be of interest to you and your farm. The other opportunities that we have would be called financial assistance, and these are basically cost share programs to address natural resource concerns that have been designated to us through the farm bills. So basically, NRCS programs are for resource conservation, not exactly farm production or starting new operations. And who do we help? We help farmers, ranchers, forest operators, anybody within the state. We are more than willing to work with you on conservation projects and conservation planning. We do talk a little bit about the funding that's available through NRCS. These are not loans. They're typically considered cost share to implement conservation on the ground or conservation practices. And these can range anywhere from, we might cover 50% of the cost to, in some cases, 75% or higher. So it really just kind of depends on what practice is installed and what the current cost share rates are. Okay, so NRCS is really big into identifying resource concerns. And here is kind of the list that we base most of our work on. So there's soil, water, air, plant, animals, and energy. And within each of those categories, there's a lot of different things that qualify. And typically these are kind of the resource concerns that we're going to look at to make improvements on your property. NRCS has a lot of different practices. In total, there's over a couple hundred different practices available that can help you with conservation. Here's just kind of a list of some common ones. And that list does go much further beyond that, but within that there are basically a number of cost share rates that we can apply for that. And these do vary. Which practices are used does vary by the county or the area or the local priorities. So that's also something that's very important to NRCS, to make sure that the work being done in each county are the resource concerns and practices that need to meet those resource concerns. I wanted to speak a little bit about conservation versus production practices. So we are more in the business of helping you conserve the water or the soil, not necessarily paying for, the first example, just a brand new irrigation system, but we could come in and make that current system more efficient. Pollinators or wildlife plantings. So we're probably not going to put in the orchard, but we could do cover crops underneath the orchard. We could do field borders to establish pollinator habitats so that it promotes better orchard development. So there's kind of a long list of things that we can help you with on the conservation side of the world. So a lot of times we get questions on who do we work with and who's eligible. So we can work with anybody that's a farmer, rancher, gardener, regardless of the size. This includes cropland, pasture, non-industrial private forests and grasslands. Folks can apply as an individual or a business. We do have something called an adjusted gross income. So basically you need to make less than $900,000 to qualify for most of our programs. There are a few exceptions. And then, you either need to own the land or have a lease on the land and have a willing landowner to let you install the conservation practices that you might be interested in doing. We also have to follow a lot of the local and state laws. This includes water rights and having irrigation history, so that we can kind of show that we're utilizing what you have as water rights and making some gains in the water conservation. And then again, you need to have an established management system in place. And so that may be where you have a conservation plan or a long range plan for your farm or ranch that then you can apply for conservation financial assistance. So if you've never worked with NRCS before, here's some things to think about. If you have a business plan, it would be good to kind of outline some of those things. So NRCS practices have a wide range of lifespans. So some of those you need to maintain or keep functioning for 1 year or all the way up to 20 years, depending on what you're installing. It's helpful to kind of know what kind of soils you have, historic land uses, site resources and limitations. And that could be on the property that you currently own or something that you're leasing. We do have a lot of great resources to get you more information on that through Web Soil Survey or getting a hold of your local NRCS office, and they can provide additional information that can be beneficial to help you make some decisions. With our programs and any of the funding that we have, there are highly erodible land, wetland compliance provisions that we have to meet. I'm not going to spend too much time on those today, but get a hold of your local offices and they can help you walk through that process to make sure that you are compliant with that and explain a little bit more about what those mean. So another thing that you can look into is a conservation activities plan, or getting an extensive engineering assistance. So depending on the scale and scope of the project, these are things that maybe you need to have in place before you apply for NRCS assistance. And this is something that we can help you develop as you start down the process. As with most government programs, there's definitely going to be some application paperwork. So this is kind of just a list of some of the things that you would have to accomplish to put in an application, which means that in addition to NRCS, you're going to have to work with the Farm Service Agency and fill out some of the eligibility paperwork, such as the adjusted gross income form, the highly erodible lands form, and some of those others. And you also are going to have to establish a farm and tract number so that we have a record of what you own, where your property is. It's kind of a unique identification number to you for that particular farm and tract. Once you have that, then you can fill out an application 1200 with NRCS. And basically that is kind of the official document that we require to say that you have signed up for potential financial assistance. Something to consider is when you're filling out these forms with both FSA and NRCS, all the forms and records need to be associated with one individual or entity. So depending on how your ownership is set up or your leases are set up, we can walk you through some of those steps to make sure we get that consistent throughout. So once we get an application, there is going to be some time required to set up a site visit, do some planning and review, and maybe have the engineer out. So this can take several weeks or longer, depending on the time of the year and the complexity of the application. We'll talk a little bit more about the application deadlines coming up, but the sooner that you can kind of reach out and we can start working on that, the more prepared we can be when the application lines do come out. Also be prepared, do some research, get estimates, and all of those kind of factors that might be going into a project up front. So then you have an idea of if the cost share that we're going to provide is going to be sufficient for your needs, or if we're going to maybe to look at different sources or different components to include in that application. We do have the ability to defer applications if we're not far enough along in the planning process. But again, that's kind of a locally led decision, and just the sooner that you can get in and work with us, the better, I guess I would say. So here's some financial considerations with our projects. So we do require that all payments go to a direct deposit account on file. You are responsible for all costs associated with completing the work, including payment of contractors and material needs. Again, we may not cover 100% of the implementation costs, so you may have to invest some of your own capital. Cost share payments are issued when the practice is complete. So think about that when you're signing up for this. You may have to buy materials before you get some of this stuff installed. But so basically you have to pay up front. We do have the option of doing an advanced payment for historically underserved applicants, where we can pay you 50% of the cost share within 90 days. So that's a nice feature. If that is something that we need to look at, we certainly can. And then the last one is NRCS cost share payments are reported as taxable income. So contract management, if you are selected for funding, you will sign a contract with us, and basically you are kind of the general contractor. So it's your responsibility to find somebody to do the work or do the work yourselves. We will have implementation requirements or engineering designs that will need to be followed before we come out and certify. So just kind of think about that as important in the contract management for any of the NRCS contracts. So for 2023, our first application deadline is coming up here in November 18th. So this is the date that you need to submit that application form, the 1200. You may also need to finalize some of the eligibility documents with FSA, and then you'll kind of work with the local offices to kind of plan to do the site visits and kind of figure out what practices that you're going to install in that particular application. So kind of a short-term turnaround time, but we kind of have deadlines throughout the year. So the sooner that you can get those applications in, then your name's kind of in the hat for any of that potential funding. Just a couple more quick slides. So every county has, well, most counties have a local field office. There's a couple of counties that have a adjoining field office, but here's kind of the list of where you can go to get additional information. This is on the NRCS Oregon website, and you can click on the county that you're in, and it'll take you to the home page of that county, and you can kind of see what the different programs are available and what cost share might be out there. I will give a caveat. I think the whole Oregon NRCS website is getting updated sometime in October, so there may be some changes to that, and I'm not sure if all the same features will be available going forward, but that certainly would be a source to get some additional information for the local areas. This is also kind of a handy tool. It's kind of an interactive map that you can zoom into where you own the property, and it'll give you an idea of what funding is currently available through the NRCS programs. And here are just a list of some folks and some websites that would be important for you when you move forward. So Stephanie Payne is the small farm and organic specialist for Central and Eastern Oregon. So she's typically the one that comes on to the beginning farmer in the know and provides information. And then Casey Myers was just hired, I believe, out of St. Helens, and he will be helping out more on the west side of Oregon. And with that, I think that's all the information that I have. I do have a couple of handouts and I will put those in the chat here in a minute.
Great. Thank you so much, Aaron. All right. Well, I am going to give Aaron a couple seconds to pull up my presentation. I will be going up next. Again, my name is Erica Molmer, and I work for the USDA Rural Development. I am a business and cooperative program specialist, and my area of specialty is the value-added producer grant. I've been coordinating that program since 2020. So I've been through a couple annual award cycles. And today I'm not here to talk about how, the parameters of the program eligibility criteria. I'm actually going to talk about the fiscal year 2022 VAPG results. So who was funded, how much money went out the door, what types of projects were funded. And then I'm also going to talk about how to prepare for the fiscal year 23 competition cycle, give you some tips and tricks on what to look out for, what to do now before the application cycle is open, and how to position yourself to be successful. So let's see. Next slide, please, Aaron. So the fiscal year 2022 application VAPG deadline to apply online last year was April 25th. The deadline for paper applications was May 2nd. I'm providing these dates because this gives a pretty good snapshot of what next year's competition is going to look like, deadline wise, and around what time of the year the deadline will be. Typically, the application becomes available for you to begin completing early, I would say, early February. The value-added producer grant is a national competition, meaning you will be competing with hundreds of other applicants across the nation. There's not a particular pot of money allocated to the states. So it is a highly competitive application. But I always encourage applicants to contact me before they begin filling out their application, or as soon as possible, to discuss their application and project goals. And also, I highly recommend signing up for GovDelivery to get information sent to you in real time. Next slide. All right, so the fiscal year 2022 VAPG received a total of 484 applications total. And of that 484, 342 were deemed eligible, and 142 were deemed ineligible. There are various reasons why an application may be deemed ineligible, but as mentioned before, it's best to begin working with me early to catch any possible reasons for ineligibility. It could be as simple as a box not being checked, or inconsistencies in the budget. Small inconsistencies can be catastrophic to an application. So working with me early is best, and I will do my best to review the application in its entirety, but I will definitely review the budget. So then of that 342 applications, only 197 applications were awarded. And I think this number is kind of low for the 2022 fiscal year. And I think it's because of the funding level being relatively low compared to past years. I didn't include the funding levels from 2022 to 2020 or 2021 because last year we had a lot of COVID related funds injected into this program. So it would kind of skew the numbers a bit. But I think that this number is low. So next year, I'm hoping that there are more applications awarded and funded, I mean. Next slide, please. So the total funding availability for the fiscal year 2022 competition was 19.75 million. And then of that 19.75 million, 2.75 million came from the COVID-19 relief funds, which was actually left over from the 2020 application cycle. So that 2.75 million, of that, only 17 awards were made nationwide. So if you didn't get funding through the COVID-19 relief funds, don't be sad, because it was a highly competitive pot of money. And this pot of money required a reduced match budget of 10% to be submitted upfront to compete for those COVID-19 relief funds. However, these funds will be exhausted next year, and the standard 1-to-1 match requirement will be reinstated. Next slide, please. So that was just a little bit about the statistics of the 2022 cycle, but I do want to touch on some areas of the application, or just the program in general, that I found to be worth noting to prospective applicants. Registering or updating your SAM account, the System for Award Management, is going to be crucial. Recently, there was a transition from the DUNS number to what's called the Unique Entity Identifier Number, or UEI. And with this change, the System for Award Management has had a significant backup in processing updates or new registration of accounts. So getting into the System for Award Management system or platform early and submitting your application is going to ensure that you have an active account for the 23 competition cycle. So that's number one. Number two is determining your ownership structure and figuring out what type of applicant you will be applying under. And Aaron just put a document in the chat, I believe. Yes, he did. Called Types of Applicants, Types of VAPG Applicants, actually. This document PDF gives a pretty good breakdown on what type of applicant you should be applying under, or potentially could be identifying as. There are there's four types: independent producer, agricultural producer group, farmer or rancher cooperative, or majority controlled producer-based business. So figuring out that piece of the application is actually very important, because if you apply for the incorrect applicant type, you might jeopardize applying for the wrong project ultimately, because there are certain projects available to certain applicant types. This is all very umbrella and very, zoomed out explanation of applicant types and project types. So please, if you have any questions, while you're filling out the application, let me know and I can help clarify that for you. Next on the list is to determine what you will be adding value to. So value-added producer grant means that you have to take a raw product and turn it into something that is value-added, and that can be determined in a variety of methodologies. The most common is change in physical state. So if you're thinking change in physical state could be milk into cheese or grapes into wine, but that's not the only type of value-added methodology. There's also There's also, oh geez, what is it called? You can add value to something by making it organic, for example. If you have an organic product, then that puts a premium on it. So determining what your value added activity will be is another important piece of the puzzle in preparing for your application. And then if you're planning on selling an alcohol related product, make sure you have your TTB license before applying. That's pretty obvious. Determine all, this is a big one. When you're thinking about developing an application, you want to almost think of it in terms of what am I going to be using the grant funds for, expense wise, because if you submit an application with ineligible expenses, that may deem your project ineligible. So thinking it through beforehand and then discussing it with myself beforehand to determine that they are all in fact eligible expenses, then that can really put you in a good position to develop a solid work plan and budget and score highly. And last but not least, I recommend signing up for the Gov Delivery once again, because you will get notified when the application goes live, and then you'll get the same email I'll get. So you're gonna hear about it in real time, and you'll be ahead of everybody else. And then once you see that email go out, shoot me an email and set up a time to discuss your project and your ideas surrounding what exactly you want to pursue. Next slide, please. And then, of course, here's my contact information. Please take down my email, or actually, I can also put it in the chat. Keep it and write a note somewhere that says, contact Erica beginning February 1st to check in on this value-added producer grant and see how I can get started. Next slide, please. Oh, next one.